The night was darker than usual. Thick clouds covered the sky, and heavy rain tapped against the windows of Daniel's small wooden house. The sound of thunder rolled over the quiet countryside. He was used to storms, but tonight something felt different. There was a strange heaviness in the air, like the silence before something unexpected. Daniel sat alone in his living room, a cup of hot tea in his hands. The soft ticking of the clock and the crackle of the fireplace were the only companions he had. Life in the countryside was lonely, but he preferred it that way. Far from the noise of the city, far from people's troubles, he liked to think nothing surprising could happen here. But then he heard it. At first it was faint, so faint that he thought the wind was playing tricks on him. A soft cry, almost like the whimper of a child, carried through the storm. He froze, listening carefully. The rain pounded harder, but the sound came again. This time clearer. It wasn't just the storm. Someone or something was outside. He put down his cup and stood up, heart beating a little faster. Curiosity pulled him toward the back door. He grabbed his old flashlight, the one he kept near the kitchen counter, and opened the door slowly. Cold rain immediately splashed his face, and a gust of wind made him shiver. The crying was louder now. It was not one voice, it was several. Two small voices mixed with one weak and trembling sound. Daniel stepped into the backyard, shining the flashlight across the wet ground. At first he saw nothing but mud and falling water. Then the beam of light caught something unusual near the old shed at the corner of his yard. A figure crouched low, holding two smaller shapes close. He walked closer, careful with each step. The figure moved back, pressing against the shed as if afraid of him. His breath caught in his chest when the light revealed more details. It was not a normal woman. Her skin was pale silver, faintly glowing under the rain. Her large, dark eyes reflected the light, and her face carried both beauty and exhaustion. She clutched two tiny children against her chest. Twins, no older than 5, their eyes glowing softly like stars. Daniel froze. His mind tried to explain what he was seeing. Maybe he was dreaming. Maybe the storm and his loneliness were playing tricks. But the sight was too real. The woman was shaking, weak, her clothes torn and soaked. The children whimpered softly, their small hands clutching her tightly. She looked at him with wide, desperate eyes. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. Still, he understood. She wasn't here to harm him. She was begging, without words, for help. Daniel's heart pounded. Every story he had read about aliens came rushing to his mind. Government agents, experiments, danger. If anyone else found them, they would be taken away, or worse. He glanced at the storm around them. The woman looked like she could collapse at any moment. The twins were freezing. He took a slow step forward. "It's okay," he said softly, though he doubted she understood his language. "I won't hurt you." Her eyes followed his every move, filled with fear but also a flicker of hope. Daniel knelt down, lowering his flashlight so it wouldn't blind them. The rain soaked through his shirt, but he ignored it. Carefully he reached out his hand, not to touch but to show he meant no harm. The children pressed closer to their mother, their glowing eyes blinking rapidly. For a moment no one moved. Only the storm filled the silence. Then slowly the alien mother shifted. She tightened her hold on her children and leaned slightly toward him, as if trusting him just enough to accept help. Daniel swallowed hard. He knew the choice before him. He could turn away, pretend he had seen nothing and let the storm carry them away. Or he could do the unthinkable, bring them inside his home, into his life, and risk everything. Another loud clap of thunder shook the sky. The twins whimpered louder, and the mother closed her eyes in pain. That decided it. Daniel stood quickly and stretched his hand forward with determination. "Come with me," he said, his voice firm this time. The woman stared at him, then down at her children. For a second, Daniel thought she might refuse, but finally she gave a small nod. With slow, shaky steps, she rose to her feet. The children clung to her, too weak to walk. Daniel stepped closer, letting her lean on his arm. She was lighter than he expected, fragile like she hadn't eaten in days. Together they crossed the muddy yard and reached his back door. Daniel pushed it open, guiding them into the warmth of his home. The firelight flickered across their faces, casting strange but gentle shadows. As the door shut behind them, Daniel felt the weight of what he had just done. His quiet life would never be the same. The storm raged outside, but inside his small house a new storm had just begun. The storm outside grew stronger. But inside Daniel's house, the fire gave a soft glow of warmth. He placed the alien mother and her twins carefully on the old sofa near the fireplace. The flames flickered across their wet faces, making their eyes shine even brighter. Daniel's hands trembled as he fetched blankets from his small bedroom. He had lived alone for years and never imagined he would one day wrap aliens in his old wool covers. But tonight nothing felt impossible. Tonight was beyond logic. The mother sat silently holding her twins close. Her chest rose and fell heavily, each breath sounding like a struggle. The twins, though frightened, reached their tiny fingers toward the heat of the fire. Their small glowing eyes softened for a moment like children finally feeling safe after being lost in the cold. Daniel placed the blankets around them, tucking them gently. "You're safe here," he whispered, though again he wasn't sure if she understood his words. The mother looked at him. Her eyes carried exhaustion, but more than that, they carried a plea. A desperate, wordless request. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to speak but couldn't form the sounds. Still, Daniel felt he understood her heart. "Please, don't send us away. Please protect my children." He sat across from them, trying to calm his racing thoughts. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why was she running? And, most dangerously, who might be chasing her? The fire crackled, and for a long moment the only sounds were the storm outside and the quiet breaths of the twins. Daniel reached for his kettle, pouring warm water into a mug. He placed it on the table in front of her, pointing at it to show it was safe. She hesitated, then slowly reached out. Her fingers were thin, trembling, almost translucent. She lifted the mug with both hands and sipped. Relief passed over her face. A small tear slipped from her eye, disappearing down her silver skin. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had seen people cry before, but something about her silent tears made him feel helpless. He wanted to say something to promise her safety, but he didn't know what words would mean anything. The twins were more curious than fearful now. One of them crawled closer to the small wooden table where Daniel's pocket flashlight still lay. The child pressed the button and the beam of light shot across the room. A soft giggle escaped and the other twin joined, trying to catch the light with tiny hands. Daniel smiled despite his fear. Children were children. Human or alien, it didn't matter. Innocence looked the same everywhere. But the mother wasn't smiling. She watched her twins with protective eyes, clutching the blanket tightly around them. Her body language spoke of fear. She was grateful, yes, but there was something else. Urgency. Daniel leaned forward. "You're running from someone, aren't you?" he said softly. She didn't reply, but her eyes flickered. That was answer enough. Daniel rubbed his forehead, trying to think. If the government, or worse, the military, found out he was hiding them, his life would be over. He could already imagine the sound of heavy boots breaking down his door. Agents pulling the mother and twins away to some hidden facility. The thought made him sick. But what choice did he have now? He looked at the twins, now curled against their mother, eyes half closed with exhaustion. He thought about leaving them outside in the storm, about what would have happened if he hadn't opened the door. The image was unbearable. No, he couldn't abandon them. The mother must have sensed his decision. Slowly she leaned forward and touched her hand to her chest, then extended it toward him, her eyes locked with his, deep and unblinking. It was the closest thing to language she had shown so far, a gesture of trust. Daniel hesitated only a second before nodding. "I'll help you," he said. "I don't know how yet, but I'll protect you." For the first time, the mother allowed her shoulders to relax. A faint glow passed over her skin, almost like her body responded to safety. She pulled her twins closer and they sighed softly, drifting into sleep against her arms. The room was quiet again, but Daniel's mind was far from calm. Questions burned inside him. Where were they from? Why were they hunted? How far would the pursuers go? And most of all, could an ordinary man like him truly protect them? The storm outside roared louder, almost as if answering his doubts. Lightning flashed through the window, casting sharp shadows across the walls. Daniel stood and walked to the door, making sure it was locked tight. He checked the windows, securing each latch. He felt like a soldier preparing for a siege, though he had no weapons, no plan, just determination. When he returned to the living room, the mother was still watching him. Her silent eyes carried the same plea, "Do not give us away. You are our only hope." Daniel sat back down, leaning his head against the chair. He was tired, but he couldn't close his eyes. He knew the storm outside was only the beginning. Something far worse was coming, and now, without choosing it, he was a part of it. The night grew colder, and though the fire still burned, Daniel could feel the weight of danger pressing closer. The storm finally began to slow, but the silence it left behind was even heavier. Daniel sat in his chair staring at the alien mother and her twins. The fire's glow touched their faces softly, and for the first time he noticed the lines of exhaustion across her features. She looked like someone who had carried a burden far too long. The twins were asleep now, curled against their mother's arms. Their tiny glowing eyes had closed, their breathing slow and peaceful. Daniel almost smiled. No one would believe this. 2 alien children sleeping on his sofa like ordinary kids. But as he looked closer, he saw scars along their arms, faint but real. His chest tightened. What kind of danger had they escaped from? The mother was not asleep. She sat upright, her dark eyes fixed on Daniel. The storm outside was fading, but inside the room the tension had only grown stronger. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something. A strange sound escaped, soft, broken words, not in his language. Daniel leaned forward, listening carefully. Safe? She whispered, her voice trembling, the accent heavy but clear enough to understand. Daniel blinked in shock. She could speak, even if only a little. Yes, he said gently. You're safe here. No one will hurt you. Her eyes glistened as if those words had given her strength. She lowered her gaze to her twins, brushing their hair with trembling fingers. Then she looked back at him, her expression filled with pain. They chase us, she said slowly, struggling with each word. No, home, no. People, only me. The broken sentences hit Daniel harder than a long story could. Her home was gone. Her people were gone. She was the only one left for her twins, for their survival. Daniel's throat went dry. He wanted to ask who they were, but he hesitated. He could see the pain in her eyes, the kind that came from remembering something too terrible. But she continued anyway. Soldiers, she whispered. Kill all. Children, taken, used. Her voice cracked and tears spilled down her cheeks. We run. Long run. Daniel's fists clenched. Soldiers, kill, taken. He didn't need the full details to understand. Whoever these pursuers were, they weren't just hunters. They were monsters. They had destroyed her world, taken children, maybe experimented on them, and now she was here, running with what little she had left. Daniel leaned closer, speaking firmly. Not here. They won't take your children here. I promise. She stared at him, searching his face as if trying to see if he truly meant it. After a long silence, she gave a slow nod. The fire popped loudly, making both of them jump. Daniel let out a nervous chuckle, but the mother's face stayed serious. She lifted her hand and pointed toward the window, her eyes narrowing. Find us, she said softly. Daniel followed her gaze. Outside, the storm had left a mist over the fields. It looked empty, but his stomach twisted. If soldiers had destroyed her world, what stopped them from coming here? What if they already were? He stood and walked to the window, peeking through the curtains. Nothing moved except the drifting fog, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He pulled the curtains shut and locked the latch tighter. When he turned back, the mother was still watching him, her eyes filled with that same silent plea he had seen before. Protect us. Keep us hidden. Daniel sat again, running a hand through his hair. His quiet life was over. The simple days of tea, books, and lonely storms had ended the moment he opened his door. He felt both afraid and strangely alive. The twins stirred in their sleep, whispering soft sounds in a language he didn't understand. Their mother hummed quietly, a strange but soothing melody. For a moment, the room felt like a different world, one where the storm, the fear, the soldiers did not exist. Just a mother, her children, and a stranger who chose to help. But the peace didn't last. A sudden sound echoed outside. Not thunder, something sharper, like metal striking against stone. Daniel froze. His heart raced as he glanced at the door. The mother's eyes widened too. She clutched her children tighter, pulling them closer under the blanket. Daniel whispered, "Stay here." He moved quietly toward the door, every step heavy. He pressed his ear against the wood. The sound came again, faint but real. Someone or something was out there. His hand shook as he reached for the old hunting knife he kept in the kitchen. He had never needed it for more than cutting rope or opening boxes, but now it felt like the only weapon he had. He waited, listening. The night was quiet again. Too quiet. Finally, he returned to the living room. The mother was watching him, her breathing fast, her eyes full of fear. He shook his head. Nothing, he lied softly. He didn't want to scare her more than she already was. But inside, Daniel knew the truth. The sound had been real. Someone was close, maybe closer than he wanted to believe. He sat back in his chair, keeping the knife near his side. The fire still burned, but the warmth no longer comforted him. His eyes stayed on the door, on the window, on the shadows that moved across the walls. The alien mother finally leaned back, exhausted. Her twins slept peacefully, unaware of the danger creeping outside. She closed her eyes, but even in her rest, her arms stayed locked tightly around them. Daniel whispered to himself, almost like a vow, "I'll keep you safe, no matter what comes." And as the night grew deeper, secrets pressed in around them, dark truths about enemies unseen, dangers unspoken, and a bond that had only just begun. Morning light spilled gently into the small wooden house. The storm had passed, leaving the air fresh and cool. Mist hung low outside, wrapping the countryside in pale silence. Inside, however, there was warmth, the soft crackle of the fire that Daniel had kept alive through the night. The alien mother still slept on the sofa, her arms wrapped protectively around her twins. She looked fragile, as if years of fear had carved deep shadows into her face. Daniel watched quietly, not wanting to disturb them. For the first time in years, his house did not feel empty. Then, small voices broke the silence. The twins stirred, their glowing eyes blinking open. They looked around with curiosity, their expressions innocent, free of the heavy sorrow their mother carried. One of them stretched tiny hands toward the morning light seeping through the window, as if trying to catch the sun. The other spotted Daniel and froze, uncertain. Daniel smiled gently and raised his hand in a wave. "Good morning," he said softly. The children tilted their heads, whispering something in their language. The sounds were soft, musical, almost like a secret code. Then, to his surprise, both twins giggled. Their voices were pure, untouched by fear. Daniel felt his chest loosen. For a moment, it was easy to forget the danger outside, the soldiers, the darkness. Here were just children, curious, playful, alive. He stood and walked into the kitchen, his footsteps slow so as not to frighten them. When he returned, he carried a small wooden box. He set it gently on the table, opened it, and revealed the toys inside. Simple things from his childhood that he had kept for no reason. A carved wooden horse, a small spinning top, a faded red ball. The twins' eyes lit up instantly. One of them reached for the ball, holding it tightly as though it were treasure. The other picked up the spinning top and turned it in tiny hands, fascinated by its shape. Daniel crouched down beside them. "Here, let me show you." He placed the top on the table, twisted it, and let it spin. The twins gasped in delight, clapping their little hands as the top whirled in circles, catching the light. Their laughter filled the room, soft but bright. And for the first time since last night, Daniel laughed too. The mother stirred at the sound, opening her eyes slowly. She sat up, blinking in confusion at first. Then, when she saw her twins laughing and Daniel sitting close, her tense shoulders softened. She said nothing, but her eyes glistened. It had been too long since she had seen her children safe enough to play. The twins were fearless now. One crawled toward Daniel's chair and tugged at his sleeve, showing him the ball. Daniel nodded and gently tossed it across the floor. The child ran after it, stumbling slightly, then laughing with joy. The other followed quickly, both of them chasing the ball across the wooden planks of the living room. Daniel's heart swelled. He had lived in this house for years, surrounded by silence, by memories of what he had lost. But now it felt alive again, echoing with laughter. Still, behind the warmth, a shadow lingered in his mind. Every giggle, every footstep, every sound, what if it carried beyond the walls? What if someone heard? He pushed the thought away, not wanting to ruin the moment. The twins grew bolder. They touched everything they could find. The lamp, the books on his shelf, the small radio by the window. They pressed buttons and turned knobs, their curiosity endless. When the radio crackled to life, they squealed in surprise, hugging each other as though it were magic. Daniel quickly turned it off, a small smile on his lips. "Careful," he said softly. "That's not a toy." The mother watched quietly, her hand resting against her chest. She didn't stop them. Instead, she let them explore, perhaps knowing how rare it was for them to feel safe enough to do so. Daniel noticed her gaze. It was soft, proud, and filled with unspoken gratitude. She whispered something in her language, almost like a prayer. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. The twins eventually grew tired, settling back onto the sofa with their toys clutched tightly in their hands. Daniel sat nearby, the knife he had kept hidden now resting on the table. He felt torn between two worlds, the joy of this small moment and the fear of what might come next. The mother broke the silence. Her voice was weak but steady. "The children, innocent. No. Deserve fear," Daniel nodded. "Yes, innocent." Her eyes filled with tears again. She looked at him with an expression that pierced his chest. "You, mine only hope," the words echoed in his head. Only hope. He was not a soldier, not a hero, just a man who had chosen to open his door. But now, to her, to them, he was everything. The sunlight shifted, casting long shadows across the room. Outside, the mist still hung over the fields. It was peaceful, but Daniel knew it would not last. Somewhere out there, someone was looking for them, someone who wouldn't care about innocence or laughter. He glanced at the twins again, now dozing against their mother's arms, and clenched his fists. He had made a silent promise already, but now it felt stronger. These children deserved to laugh again, to grow, to live. And if the world tried to take that away, it would have to go through him first. The next 2 days passed in a fragile rhythm. Daniel gave the alien mother and her twins food, warmth, and a little space to breathe. Slowly, the fear in their eyes softened, replaced by cautious trust. The twins played with his old toys, their laughter echoing through the quiet house. The mother grew stronger each day, though her eyes never stopped scanning the windows, always alert, always waiting for the worst. Daniel tried to pretend things were normal, but deep inside, he knew the storm had not truly passed. It was only waiting. On the third night, his unease returned. He was chopping wood in the backyard when he noticed something strange. A patch of the earth near the edge of the field was scorched. The grass blackened as though burned by heat far stronger than fire. He crouched to touch it, and the soil crumbled like ash between his fingers. His stomach tightened. He had not used fire there, and no storm left marks like that. When he returned to the house, he found the mother standing by the window. She had seen it too. Her eyes met his, full of silent warning. Near, she whispered. Daniel's pulse quickened. He closed the curtains quickly, then checked the locks on the doors. He wanted to stay calm for the twins, but fear pressed against his chest like a heavy stone. That night, sleep would not come. Every creak of the floor, every rustle of the wind outside made him flinch. He sat in the living room, knife in hand, staring at the fire while the mother and her children rested. Then it happened. A low hum filled the night, faint but steady, like the vibration of unseen machines. Daniel stood immediately, his heart racing. He moved to the window and peeked through the curtain. At first, he saw nothing but mist and darkness. Then, at the far edge of the field, lights flickered, cold white beams moving slowly across the land. Searchlights. He cursed under his breath. Whoever was looking for them had arrived. The mother stirred, sensing the danger even before he could speak. She rose quickly, clutching her twins close. The glow of fear in her eyes made Daniel's blood run cold. She didn't need to say anything. He already knew. If those lights reached the house, everything was over. Daniel blew out the lanterns and dimmed the fire until only faint embers remained. The room sank into shadows. "Stay quiet," he whispered urgently. The twins buried their faces against their mother, trying not to make a sound. Daniel crouched low near the window, watching as the lights crept closer. They swept back and forth like predators hunting for prey. He could hear faint metallic clicks as if machines were moving through the mist. Then came voices, harsh, mechanical, not fully human. The sound carried in the still night air. Daniel's skin prickled. Whoever they weren't here for peace. The mother whispered something in her language, almost like a prayer. Daniel shook his head. "No, don't give up. They won't find us." But even as he said it, doubt clawed at him. Minutes felt like hours. The searchlights moved slowly across the field, sometimes vanishing behind the fog, then reappearing closer. Daniel held his breath each time they neared the house. His fingers gripped the knife so tightly his knuckles turned white. Finally, the light stopped. They hovered at the far corner of the field, almost as if deciding where to move next. The humming grew louder, sharper, vibrating through the walls. Daniel felt sweat roll down his neck. Then suddenly the beams shifted away. Slowly the lights drifted back into the mist until they vanished. The humming faded. The night returned to silence. Daniel exhaled shakily, his body trembling with relief. He turned to the mother, who was still clutching her children tightly. Her eyes glistened, but not with relief. She knew this was not over. They hadn't left, they were only searching wider. Come back, she said softly, her voice trembling. Daniel nodded grimly. Then we'll be ready. The next morning he walked the property with new eyes. The woods, the fields, the old shed, everything became a potential hiding place or a weak point. His quiet home was no longer just a house. It was a battlefield. He gathered what he could, tools, nails, rope, anything to reinforce the doors and windows. He even set crude traps near the edge of the yard, broken glass hidden under leaves, sharp stakes in the soil. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. The twins followed him curiously, not fully understanding. They laughed when he hammered boards across the back door, thinking it was a game. Daniel forced a smile for them, but inside he felt the weight of fear. The mother helped as best she could, though her movements were still weak. At one point, she touched his arm gently, her eyes filled with something he hadn't seen before. Trust. It was silent but powerful. She believed in him. As night fell again, Daniel sat by the fire, the knife and a heavy axe within reach. The twins slept close to their mother, unaware of the storm building around them. He stared into the flames and whispered to himself, "They'll come again. And when they do, they won't take you." Outside, the mist thickened once more. Somewhere in the darkness, machines stirred, voices whispered, and shadows crept closer. The hunters had not given up, and Daniel knew the true fight was about to begin. The night was heavy with silence. Daniel sat by the dim fire, the axe leaning against the wall and his knife resting within reach. Every muscle in his body was tense, waiting for the sound he knew would come. The mother and her twins slept close together on the sofa, but even in sleep her arms never loosened. She held her children as though she feared they could vanish at any moment. Daniel's ears picked up the faint vibration before he saw anything. A low hum crawled through the ground, rising into his bones. He moved quickly to the window and peered through a gap in the boards he had nailed earlier. There they were, figures in the mist, tall, shadowed forms, moving with mechanical precision. Cold searchlights swept the fields again, but this time they weren't passing by. They were closing in on his house. Daniel's chest tightened. He turned back to the mother, whispering urgently, "They're here. Stay quiet. Don't move." She nodded, fear flickering across her glowing eyes. The twins stirred, sensing the danger even in their sleep. Daniel's hands shook as he gripped the axe. He was just a man, an ordinary man. But tonight he was the only wall between them and death. The first sound came like a knife through silence. Clang! A metallic hand slammed against the back door, shaking it hard. The twins woke instantly, whimpering. The mother pressed them close, whispering in her language to calm them. Daniel stood near the door, his breath shallow. The boards he had nailed rattled under the pressure. Another slam followed, harder this time, the wood creaking. He forced himself to stay calm. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. "If you want them, you'll have to go through me." The banging stopped suddenly. Silence stretched. Then crash! A window shattered in the kitchen, glass exploding across the floor. A beam of white light cut through the dark room. Daniel spun, raising the axe. A tall figure crawled through the broken frame, its body sleek and metallic, eyes glowing red. It moved like a machine but breathed like something alive. Daniel didn't wait. He swung the axe with all his strength. The blade hit the creature's shoulder, sparking against metal. The figure staggered back, letting out a sharp mechanical shriek. Daniel yanked the axe free and swung again, aiming lower. This time, the blade bit deep into one of its legs and the machine collapsed, its glowing eyes flickering before dimming into silence. The mother gasped softly, clutching her twins tighter. But there was no time to celebrate. More figures were circling the house. Daniel heard their heavy steps on the porch, their claws scraping wood. The hunters were everywhere. He dragged the fallen machine away from the window and quickly pushed the kitchen table against the frame to block another entry. His heart thundered in his chest. He wasn't sure how long he could keep them out. Then came another attack, this time from the front door. The wood splintered under repeated blows. Daniel ran forward, bracing it with his shoulder. "Not here," he shouted through clenched teeth. The door buckled again, nearly throwing him back. He pushed harder, sweat dripping down his face. He could hear the mother whispering urgently behind him, the twins crying softly. Their fear gave him strength. He grabbed a nail hammer from the counter and drove the last few planks harder into the frame. For the moment, the door held, but it was only a matter of time. Daniel turned, panting, and met the mother's eyes. She raised her trembling hand, pointing toward the back of the house. "Escape?" she asked. Daniel shook his head firmly. "No, they'll see you. We fight here." Her lips trembled, but she nodded, pulling the twins deeper under the blankets. Another crash shook the house, the shed outside collapsing under some unseen force. They were tearing through everything. The sound of metallic voices echoed in the mist, strange commands in a language Daniel didn't understand. He knew they wouldn't stop. Not until they had the mother and her children. Daniel's eyes burned with determination. He picked up the knife and tucked it at his side, then gripped the axe again. "If you want them," he whispered to the shadows outside, "you'll have to kill me first." The next moment, the front door shattered. Wood splinters flew across the room. A second figure forced its way inside, taller and stronger than the first. Its red eyes locked on the mother and twins instantly. Daniel roared and charged. The axe swung down, sparks exploding as it clashed with metal. The machine struck back, its clawed arm swiping across his shoulder. Pain burned, but Daniel didn't stop. He slammed the axe into its chest again and again until the glow in its eyes faded to nothing. He stumbled back, gasping for air, blood dripping from his cut shoulder. He looked at the sofa, the mother still clutching her children, her eyes wide with both terror and awe. For a moment, silence returned. Only the crackling fire and Daniel's ragged breaths filled the room. But outside, more shadows gathered. The fight was far from over. Daniel gripped his axe tighter, ignoring the pain. He planted his feet firmly on the wooden floor and stared at the door frame where new shadows flickered. This was his stand. This was his house, and he would not let them take her or her children alive. The house was filled with smoke and the smell of burnt metal. The last of the hunters lay scattered across the floor, their glowing red eyes dark forever. Daniel stood in the center of the wreckage, chest heaving, blood trickling down his arm from the cut on his shoulder. His axe was slick with black oil that dripped from the machines he had destroyed. The silence afterward was almost deafening. For a long moment, only the crackle of the fire and Daniel's ragged breathing filled the air. Behind him, the mother rose slowly from the sofa, still clutching her twins. Her wide eyes stared at him, trembling with shock. He turned, his body aching, but forced himself to stand tall. "It's over," he said hoarsely. "You're safe now." She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "No, not over. They return. More come." Daniel swallowed hard. She was right. If these hunters had tracked her here, others could follow. His house would never be safe again, but when he looked at her, at the twins now reaching out to him with small glowing hands, he knew what he had to do. He dropped the axe to the floor, falling to his knees. The twins crawled toward him without fear, their eyes shining in the dim firelight. One touched his injured shoulder gently while the other rested a tiny hand on his chest. The warmth of their touch eased the pain for a moment. Daniel felt his throat tighten. The mother stepped closer. Her silver skin glowed faintly in the flickering firelight. Her eyes full of tears, she whispered slowly, carefully choosing the words she had struggled to form before. "You, protector, you, hope." Daniel lowered his gaze. "I'm no hero," he said softly. "I'm just a man who opened his door." But the mother shook her head. "No, family." The word cut deep into Daniel's chest. For years he had lived alone, burying himself in silence and routine. His own family had been taken by time and tragedy, leaving him with nothing but memories. Yet now, standing here among the wreckage of battle, 3 pairs of eyes looked to him, not as a stranger, but as something far greater. A father. Daniel's hands shook as he reached forward, pulling the twins gently into his arms. They clung to him tightly, their small bodies trembling but safe. The mother watched, her lips trembling, then sank to her knees beside them. For the first time since he had seen her, she smiled. It was faint, fragile, but real. They stayed like that for a long while, holding each other in the ruins of his once quiet home. The world outside was still dangerous, still waiting to take them. But in that moment, they had something stronger than fear. They had each other. When dawn finally broke, Daniel stepped outside into the cold morning air. The mist was lighter now, the first rays of sunlight pushing it back. He scanned the field, half expecting more shadows, more lights. But there was only silence, only the sound of birds returning after the storm. He knew this peace would not last. Others would come. The hunters would not give up. But his mind was clear now. Running was the only way. Inside, the mother was tending to his wound with gentle hands, using strange herbs from a small pouch she had carried hidden beneath her torn clothes. The pain dulled under her touch. He looked at her, and though no words were spoken, he understood she had chosen to trust him completely. The twins, meanwhile, played quietly with the wooden horse he had given them, their laughter filling the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. It was a fragile happiness, but it was real. Daniel gathered supplies, food, blankets, tools, everything they could carry. His house, once his only world, was no longer a safe haven. But the thought didn't crush him. Instead, he felt a strange sense of freedom. He was no longer alone. He had something worth fighting for. As they prepared to leave, the mother touched his arm again. Her glowing eyes met his, and she whispered a word he hadn't heard before. It was foreign, soft, but filled with meaning. She repeated it, then touched her chest and pointed at him. Daniel frowned, trying to understand. "What does it mean?" She gave a small smile, her voice breaking as she spoke. "Father," Daniel's breath caught. His chest tightened painfully, but he couldn't hold back the tears. He looked at the twins, who now clung to his legs, their innocent eyes filled with trust, and for the first time in years he let himself feel it. Belonging. They stepped out together into the morning light. An abandoned, alien mother, her innocent twins, and the man who had chosen to stand between them and the darkness. The world would hunt them. Danger would return. But whatever came next, they would face it as more than survivors. They would face it as a family. And in Daniel's heart, one vow burned brighter than the rising sun. No matter what, I will protect them. Until my last breath, they are mine to keep safe.